Bonjour tout le monde and welcome back to another French video from Marat. In today's video we are going to be looking at part 2 of Passé Composé. Let's begin. To start off, let's do a revision of the basic of Passé Composé. We use Passé Composé in order to talk about a one-time completed action in the past. We form it by having the subject plus the auxiliary avoir or être, conjugating the present, plus the participe passé of the verb. For regular verbs, the participe passé are the ones that follow. For ER verbs, we remove the ER and add E with an accent aigu. For IR verbs, we remove the IR and add an I. And for RE verbs, we remove the RE and add a U. In my previous video, I talked about how we use Passé Composé with the auxiliary avoir. In today's video, we're going to be looking at Passé Composé with the auxiliary être. First, let's take a look at how we conjugate être in present tense. Je suis, tu es, il, elle est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils, elles sont. Now that we know the conjugation of être, let's look at when être is used in Passé Composé as an auxiliary. First is when verbs are part of the acronym Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp. The next usage is for reflexive verbs or les verbes pronominaux. Verbs that are not part of any of the two categories are used with the auxiliary avoir. Let's take a closer look at which verbs fall into the acronym Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp. Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp verbs are used to describe a kind of movement. These are the ones that follow. Devenir, the participe passé devenu. Revenir, the participe passé revenu, which describe doctor. Monter, with the participe passé monter. Rester, with the participe passé rester. Sortir, with the participe passé sorti, which describe Mrs. Venir, with the participe passé venu. Arriver, with the participe passé arrivé. Naître, with the participe passé né. Descendre, with the participe passé descendu. Entrer, with the participe passé entré. Rentrer, with the participe passé rentré. Tomber, with the participe passé tombé. Retourner, with the participe passé retourné. Aller, with the participe passé aller. Mourir, with the participe passé mort. And partir, with the participe passé parti. These are all the verbs that create the last part of the acronym Vandertramp. Now let's take a look at how Passé Composé is formed with Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp verbs. We start off with the pronoun or the sujet, je, tu, il, elle, nous, vous, il, elle, or any other subject in question. The next is to add the être conjugation in present tense. Suis, est, sont, et, sont, plus the participe passé of the Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp verb. Here is an example with venir. We have the pronoun, then the être conjugated in present tense, then the participe passé of venir, which is venu. So, je suis venu, tu es venu, il est venu, elle est venue, nous sommes venus, vous êtes venus, ils sont venus, elles sont venues. Moving on to negative form for Passé Composé with Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp verbs. So the conjugation of être comes after ne, and the participe passé for the Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp verbs comes after pas. So the formation is sujet plus ne plus être conjugating the present tense plus pas plus the participe passé of Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp verbs. For example, nous ne sommes pas restés à la maison. We did not stay at home. Here, the sujet is nous plus ne plus the conjugation of être in present tense, which is some, plus pas plus the participe passé of the verb rester, which is rester. Moving on to the second usage of auxiliary être is reflexive verbs. So in reflexive verbs, subject and the object of the action is the same. So essentially, the action reflects back on the person. These can be actions that are done by yourself, for example, brushing your teeth, washing your hair, sleeping, anything like that. There's more to come in my next video on reflexive verbs. Now let's take a look at how reflexive verbs are used in Passé Composé. So we start off with the pronoun or sujet, je, tu, il, elle, nous, vous, il, elle, or any other subject in question. Then we go on to our pronoun réfléchi. So me, tu, ce, nous, vous, ce. Then we conjugate être in present tense. Suis, est, sont, est, sont, sont, and then we add our participe passé of the reflexive verb. Here's an example with se laver. We start off with our pronom, then add the pronom réfléchi, then être conjugated in present tense, then the participe passé of laver, which is laver. So it'll be je me suis lavé, tu t'es lavé, il s'est lavé, elle s'est lavée, nous nous sommes lavés, vous vous êtes lavés, ils se sont lavés, elles se sont lavées. A quick reminder is that when we have two vowels next to each other, we add an apostrophe. For example, we add te and a together, so that'll become te. And then se and then a will become se. Now let's look at the negative form with reflexive verbs. The reflexive pronoun comes after ne, conjugation of être comes after the reflexive pronoun, and the participe passé comes after pas. So the formation would be sujet plus ne plus reflexive pronoun plus être conjugated in the present tense plus pas plus the participe passé of the verb. For example, je ne me suis pas réveillé tôt. I did not wake up early. Now you may have noticed some extra letters such as an E or an S with the participe passé of the verb. These are called agreements or accords in French. Let's take a closer look at what these mean. With the verbs conjugated with être, there is an agreement with the subject. So essentially, the participe passé has an agreement with the subject. If the subject is masculine, there is no accord. If it's feminine, we add an E at the end of the participe passé. If the subject is masculine and plural, we add an S at the end of the participe passé. And if the subject is feminine and plural, we add an ES at the end of the participe passé. Let's take a closer look at the example with venir. We start off with je suis venu without an accord since the subject is masculine. However, if the subject is feminine, we would add an E at the end. Same rule applies for tu es venu. Since the subject is masculine, there is no accord. However, if the subject is feminine, we would add an E at the end. Il est venu, there is no accord since the subject is masculine. Elle est venue, there is an accord, we add an E at the end since the subject is feminine. Nous sommes venus, there is an accord since the subject is masculine and plural, we would add an S at the end. However, if the subject is feminine and plural, we would add an ES at the end. Vous êtes venus also follows the same rule as nous. Ils sont venus, there is an accord since the subject is masculine and plural, we would add an S at the end. And elles sont venues also has an accord since the subject is feminine and plural, we would add an ES at the end. Here are a couple of example sentences. The first one is Sarah est entrée dans sa voiture. There is an E at the end of the participe passé because the subject is feminine. Lexi et Meredith sont allés au centre commercial. There is an ES at the end of the participe passé because the subject is feminine and plural. The last sentence is Jake et Robert sont retournés en Australie. We add an S at the end of retourner because the subject is masculine and plural. And that's it for today's video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Au revoir mes amis!